people haven't come back from the craziness to reality.
Yeah, exactly.
We just exist in this heightened level now.
Yeah. I have, are we on already?
Yeah, we're going right now.
Okay. I have, I think it was my brother-in-law who said to me that he had heard, excuse me, not that everything was perfect 6-7 years ago by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems like everything kind of went upside down about 5-6 years ago. We could say it was the 2016 election, but whatever it was, just things went crazy. And his theory was he had heard somebody say that, I forget what they call it, it's the collider in Switzerland, the Hadron Collider. Anyway, it's where they smash atoms at each other at high speed. There were people who were afraid that that would cause a rip in time. And there are people who say, and you always kind of laugh at it at first, that it did cause a rip in time and we all went through it and we're in an alternate timeline. And then you go, ha, 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 huh. I wonder, because we wouldn't know. Maybe there's another group of us that's continuing the timeline from 10 years ago, and they're just off leading a great life, and we got thrown into this world where it's just craziness and insanity and madness and anger and everything else going on. And it's like, how did we get here so quickly? Well, we dropped through a black hole of some sort, and this is where we now are.
It's almost like we are existing in a reality TV show. That it's almost scripted to some point, right? But if you were thinking, how could I really spice this up? What would I do? And that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're just tracking along that path of, okay, how do we add a little more? Let's turn up the volume just a tad bit.
A reality TV show, exactly. There are people who, political implications intended, who are saying that Handmaid's Tale, who knew it was going to be a documentary? Because of everything that has just gone on around this place. So we're living in a reality show. Yeah, I'd rather be a scripted one.
I never saw A Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I haven't. I heard it's good, but I haven't dived into it yet.
It's terrifyingly wonderful. It is, the storyline behind it?
Yeah, it's basically, I know that there's this weird dynamic of women are just like there to provide a womb in some sense.
Yeah, you pretty much hit it. A super fundamentalist, conservative, religious movement takes place in the United States and takes over. I believe there was a war that it takes. Anyway, it creates a country called Gilead. Anyway, and it's basically New England and some other parts of the country, and women have no rights. It's got something to do with women are not able to have babies. So if you are a woman who's able to have a baby, they take you and you become a handmaid, and you are given to other couples where it's legalized rape. And then the baby comes out, and the baby is the child of the couple that took you in. And yeah, it's a very frightening story, but there's more truth in it these days than I would like to believe. But such is good science fiction, I guess. But even so,
it's almost terrifying how some of those dystopian ideas have almost manifested in some sense. The one that comes to mind, I read 1984.
Oh yeah,
a couple of weeks ago, or a couple months ago, maybe now.
Is that the first time you read it?
Yeah, I've come across it just in passing, or people referencing
Big Brother.
Oh man, and reading that and thinking, oh, this is just insane. And then I read A Brave New World right after.
Okay, so I was going to ask, did you read that?
It was a little bit much going from that to that. It kind of messed with me for a few days. I was like, we're tracking in a weird direction.
When I had to read those, I think it was high school. And I remember, so this would have been late 60s, early 70s. And the theory was that Russia, at that time, Soviet Union, was heading in the direction of 1984. And we were heading in the direction of Brave New World. I don't know what the hell is going on with Russia, but we do seem to be heading, hopefully we're stopping it, but heading in the direction of 1984. And my politics are liberal, so I have a lot of concern about what's going on. That said, the indictment yesterday, the the third indictment gives me a little bit of hope, at least, that the rule of law will stand and we will not continue to move down that way. But who knows? Yeah.
I have not dived into the third indictment yet. I haven't really checked out any of them, to be completely honest, other than Twitter interpretations.
It's now called X.
Yeah, X. New iteration.
Speaking of crazies.
From what I've heard, it seems that there's some weird free speech element to it that might get a little murky. Does that track with your interpretation?
Yeah, although I heard somebody today, so for people who are just watching this or whatever, we're recording this less than 24 hours after the indictment came down. And there is a free speech component in the fact that anybody, short of the proverbial shouting fire in a crowded theater, there are limits to free speech. One of which is shouting. You can't go into a crowded theater and go, fire, and it's free speech. There is a free speech component, and I'm a real advocate of the First Amendment. I got involved in the ACLU in the 70s because of that. Anyway, there is a free speech component that former President Trump or anybody is allowed to say what they believe, whether it's true or not. Where Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, is saying that the law was violated is you can say anything you want. You can lie all you want, because these are all proven lies. However, you cannot entice nor conspire with other people to do crimes based on those lies. So it's not the free speech that's the problem. It's saying that you can lie and say the election was rigged, as is his line. You can say that all you want. You can tell people there were reports, etc. But then you can't say because of that and get a bunch of people to go together to take an action against it. That then moves into the area of conspiracy. So that's, if you look at the 4 charges, 3 of them are, I think, conspiracy charges, where he allegedly, as if he's going to sue me, but he allegedly tried.
Got to cover your bases, right?
Yeah, because who knows? He could be listening to Growing Pains and go, I got that guy now. But where once you start to move into getting other people to commit a crime, that's where the problem comes in. So
that's the line that you can't cross.
That's the line that you cannot cross, yeah. And all the evidence is there. The other thing that makes it interesting is a lot of people, of course, consider this, what do they call it, a witch hunt or whatever. Every single person who has given testimony, if any exceptions, I can't think of them, in the January 6th committee, as well as in these indictments, were all people who worked for him and appointed by him, and were all Republicans. So how it can be a Democratic witch hunt when it's all your own people is just another... Well, what can I say? I have my opinions. They have not been stated. Yeah.
It's kind of hard when the people around you are coming out against you. That could be interpreted.
My wife and I were talking last night about this, and she and I have a very similar opinion of it. I think part of what's going on for him is he has never been held accountable. I mean, imagine a world where you live, where you can do pretty much you can do anything you want, and there's no price to pay. And if you look back on his history, even before politics, there's never been a serious repercussion. He's had money from before he was born, got to do whatever it was he wanted, and there has been no price. So if you live in that world, add the narcissism to it, and everybody knows he's a narcissist, you'll just do anything, because the concept of paying a price for it just doesn't exist in your mind. So I would presume that he's just freaking out about the fact that, what do you mean I couldn't do that? I listened to another podcast, a guy named Bob Seska, and he has an expression that Trump always makes things worse for Trump. If he would just keep his mouth shut, he probably wouldn't be where he is. But anytime something happens to him, he goes, oh, and then he just give some more information about it. And they go, all right, well, thanks for that. You know, what was it? The second indictment, the one about the papers in Florida, you know, where that was bad enough. Then out comes the recording of him showing the papers to people. And he's like, that's not a problem. Those are my papers. Then comes the superseding indictment on that one. It's like, if you would have kept your mouth shut, you wouldn't have that. But
well, and saying, oh, you know, I could have declassified these as president, but I didn't. That's a rough way to go.
And the argument wasn't about whether they were classified. They were whether you could have them even if they were declassified. You can't just go into the White House and take things, even if you lived there before. Once you've moved out, they're not yours anymore. So we can continue down politics. I'm well-versed, or you can ask me another question.
No, it's just fascinating in this time to look at the political sphere because it just seems like a cluster on all levels, just across the board. Do you think that narcissistic tendency, do you think that is almost a requirement to get to those higher echelons?
I would think you would have to have a certain
to some degree,
element of narcissism. I mean, if nothing else, to be able to withstand the barbs and the arrows that are thrown at you and say, well, that's no big deal. I think where he and many others fall short is, of course, maybe they're at odds. You have to have a sense of empathy too, because that's what, you know, love or hate Joe Biden. There's a relatability where, from his background, he knows what it's like to be a working person. You might say, well, he's faking it, or you might say that he's incompetent or whatever else. Those are arguments for another place. But the fact is that he can relate to somebody, and a narcissist just doesn't have empathy. They just don't. So when people are suffering, if you remember the hurricane in Puerto Rico, when Trump was president, and he goes down to Puerto Rico and he's tossing paper towels at people, and it's like, I don't think they're there for. I mean, sure, imagine a paper towel would help, but as opposed to other presidents, including presidents I disagree with, such as George Bush, who go down there and there's a sense of, oh, I care about what's happening to you. I, as a progressive or a Democrat, might say, well, you don't show it right, or your policies to get there are wrong. But I wouldn't argue with the fact that somebody like George Bush cares about people because he could relate to them, as every other president I've seen on some level. The narcissism it's all about me. The fact that here we are in a podcast 3,000 miles from D.C.
And we're talking about it.
There we go. You know, it's, I've been learning about codependent. I've already been pretty well versed in codependence, but I am learning about addictive behaviors right now, and how someone who has strong personality disorders just cannot relate to other people. It has to be all about them. That's kind of what feeds them, is I need all of this attention. I think it comes from an internal self-loathing. I think if we were able to pry open a narcissist, let's take Trump, and could actually look at what he feels, because I got to believe there's some feelings in there, that he doesn't like himself a whole lot. And as opposed to going to therapy or processing in some way and trying to heal, you cover it over with other behaviors. And the narcissistic behavior is, well, you know, I really don't like myself, but look how great I am. And then it's like, I don't have to look at it. And from everything I've heard about the way his father treated him, he was not well treated, not at all. You know.
There's this funny meme that went around the internet for a while where it was talking about men in therapy, and it would say, oh, men would rather, you know, start a podcast than go to therapy, or do X thing that's harder rather than just go deal with their issues. And I think that's incredibly applicable just across the board. I think
two guys on a podcast.
Yeah,
right?
Well, yeah, right. Fitting for us right now. But most people, I think there's just a weird desire to not face the real problem, to try to almost redirect your focus so that you can ignore what the root cause is
Mm-hmm.
of why you're acting this way or why you're having these challenges in your life. Well, rather than deal with that, I'm going to go, work overtime so I can get some more money to go feed my gambling habit.
That's easier. Let me put this on Do Not Disturb just so I don't get bothered while we're here. I just realized Do Not Disturb on until I leave. There we go. Because I was suddenly thinking, oh my God, my phone could ring or something like that. But yeah, if you think about it, especially for men, the way we've been raised, and I think this is changing. I think women are becoming more like men in this case, and hopefully men are becoming more like women. But men are raised to do things. That's kind of where our self-worth has been for, I don't know, decades, centuries, who knows, since Adam and Eve, but that's what has been considered the sign of a man. That's masculine, to go out and do things.
You're a provider.
You're a provider, yeah. And in the past, that's how it was, because the women had to take care of the babies, and the man had to go out and do whatever the men did and bring it home, because the women couldn't be lugging around a bunch of kids, especially before houses and all that. So men had to provide. That's what we were raised to believe, and that's a more comfortable place. Women had to deal with more of the emotions, and one might argue, I don't want to come across as sexist, and I don't think I am, but one might argue that hormonal differences also make a difference in how people react to feelings. So to take a guy, certainly self-accepted because I'm in therapy, but to take a guy and put him in therapy and say, now let's take a look at what makes you tick, and sometimes you open that up and you go, oh my God, I don't like that about me. And then you can't close it up again. You can drink, smoke, do whatever addictive behavior you want so you don't think about it. But a consciousness raised can never be lowered. It's just once you realize, oh my God, I'm really afraid. Fear is, I'd rather go out and do something than feel the fear. And when you get into therapy, especially if you get into it on a deep level, it brings up all sorts of insights. I happen to like that. I like knowing what makes me tick. But then again, I would not be what most people would call a typical guy. But then there's also, I think women are, I'd say, evolving. That's a positive reference to it. But I know my wife, who is somebody who works a lot on her emotions, she will admit that she feels much more comfortable now. If she's not working, if she's not doing something, then she doesn't know what to do with herself, because then you're left with your own thoughts. And, in your own thoughts, it can be a scary place, especially when you're not happy. We have to believe we're all happy all the time.
And a lot of times we're not.
I think it's an unrealistic expectation. I have a family member who's going through some very severe, her house, she had a contractor come in, and the contractor she doesn't live around here, totally screwed up her house big time. I mean, it caused black mold and all sorts of other things that they can't even really live in their house. And this has been going on for near 3 years. And they went to the state contracting board, which I advocated, and the board said, well, you can have this much money, but it's, they said, yeah, you're right. And so you get this much money back, and it's like 20% of what they now need to repair everything else that's going on. And then she finds out that her son has what could be a fatal condition. It's called arterial venal malformation, which is brain bleeds. And it usually hits people in their late teens, early 20s is where it makes itself known. It's called the silent killer. And what happens is a late teen, early 20-something usually will virtually be walking down the street and then just drop dead. And they go, oh my God, what happened? It's blood vessels in the brain explode. So this happened to her son 7 years ago, and he was rushed into the hospital, and they were able to fortunately take care of it. But there was one of the bleeds that was in a really precarious position in the brain. So they did some work to it, and they said, now only time will tell if this actually fixed it. Well, here we are 7 years later, and it's back again. And so they're dealing with that, and they're dealing with the house, and part of what she's going through is feeling bad about not feeling optimistic, because that's, oh, well, put on a happy face, and there's always tomorrow and all that. No, sometimes life just plain sucks. And how do you deal with it? You know, it's, we were just talking about the state of the world these days. You know, you wake up.
It's easy to get depressed when you're talking about that.
Yeah. And then I believe that, okay, so we talked a little bit about this last time. There is, my spiritual philosophy called Science of Mind, is there is one energy. Everything is one energy. That's it. Some people call it God. I personally have an issue with the use of the word God because of a bunch of baggage. But I can accept that there is one all-powerful universal force. If you could take a look at us right now on the subatomic level, you wouldn't see Nick and Scott sitting across from a table with microphones. You would see just various types of energy sitting here, and there would be no division between the energy that is me, you, or for that matter, this table. It's all one type of energy. So it makes sense that if the world has a lot of problems in it, and the people of the world are feeling those problems, that's a form of energy. Thought is energy. Emotions and feelings are energy. At their base level, that's all they are. You know, there's no chemical. It's just, I mean, yes, there's chemicals, but the chemicals are energy. So if enough of the world is feeling a certain way, add COVID into the mix, and it's got to penetrate into everything. You can tell when you walk by somebody, or if you're talking to somebody, if they're down, even if they don't say they're down, you can go, oh yeah, I can feel that. You just feel an energy. And conversely, you can feel an energy from people when they're upbeat. But right now, so much of the world is overwhelmed, overloaded, depressed, anxious, scared. Look at Ukraine. You know, it's got to permeate everything. Now add that into the fact that this is the hottest month in history. And I'll go so far as to go way out on a limb. I believe in something that's called the Gaia hypothesis. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not.
Okay. So the Gaia hypothesis basically says that the Earth itself is a living being. And people will go, oh, it's not living. How can you do that? Well, in the same way, a bacteria that's living in your gut, if it was communicating with other bacterias and said, you know, this place that we're living in, it's a living being. Oh, no, it's not. You know, there's no way we in our insignificant, tiny little place could possibly know that what we're living on is alive unto itself. So the Gaia hypothesis says that the Earth is a living entity unto its own. I think what we have done to it over the since the industrial age, but certainly accelerated from the 50s on, is actually hurting the planet. I mean, yes, it's hurting the planet. We all know about climate change, but there is, on some level, the Earth has a fever, which would probably be the best analogy for climate change, and it's trying to cure itself, and hence the hurricanes. Hence the wild weather that we're having, the extensive heat waves. Yes, it's all climate change. I'm not saying there isn't climate change, because I'm a firm believer that we have done this to it. But it is, if you had a fever, if you were in pain, you would do what you could to get rid of it too. That's just what you would do. I think that's what's happening with the Earth. And we all live on this thing, which is feeling this way. Of course we're going to feel that way. You know, we're absorbing the energy of the planet. So, I mean, there's a, I think it's called the 10,000th monkey. Somebody else said it's called the 1,000th monkey, but there's I don't think it's a theory. It's whatever it is. If I remember the way it goes, monkeys would learn a certain thing, like how to use a stick to get ants out of an anthill. That's one of the tools that monkeys have learned to do, is they take twigs. They like to eat ants, no accounting for taste. And they would lick the stick. This is what chimpanzees, I guess, maybe monkeys do it also. And then they stick the stick into an anthill. And of course, all these ants get on it and take it out, like you're at a carnival
Fast
or
food.
something. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, how did that become a worldwide phenomenon where all chimpanzees know to do that? Well, chimpanzees in the wild, it's a common thing. And the thing is, it's called the 1,000th or the 10,000th monkey, that when enough of the population of something does it, has figured out something, it just flows. So if enough of the world knows a certain thing, the rest of the world will know a certain thing. In science of mind philosophy, there is something called racial consciousness, which is not to be racial like white, black, or anything, but it's that all of these thoughts we have, again, go into this collective energy sphere. Well, collective energy is not a sphere, it's everywhere. Thoughts are energy, thoughts are things. I think, you think, that energy goes somewhere. It doesn't go away. Einstein said energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So when I have a thought, it came from somewhere and it goes somewhere. And if enough people think a certain thing, it can't be destroyed. That form of energy gets into the collective consciousness, and then we all kind of know it. That's why, I don't know about you, but I was born in 1954, and to this day, we're almost 100 years past the Great Depression of 1929. I still, and I imagine as I'm saying this, other people will relate to this, have what would be called, I've worked on it, it's gotten better, a poverty consciousness. There won't be enough, there won't be enough, there won't be enough. Well, where did that come from? I remember stories of my grandmother who lived through the Depression. My mom was a small child at that point. But my grandmother in the Depression telling stories about not having enough money to make it. And, she was an immigrant from Russia and things were very, very difficult. Well, that got absorbed into my family collective history. And here, almost 100 years later, I've never missed a bill. I've never missed a meal. Yet that fear still exists. Why? Because it's a collective consciousness thing. People just assume it. If everybody lived in a society where we all assumed there would always be enough, how different would everything be? And it would just be a thought change. We wouldn't be fighting over land. We probably wouldn't be, we would find ways to cooperate. Because of our thoughts, we take actions. So,
well, that poverty mindset is incredibly powerful in some regards, in the sense that I know a ton of people that have had that for various reasons, and it's incredibly difficult for them to get out of that. It's almost like a parasite that has ingrained itself in them, and they just can't shake it. They can recognize, oh, okay, I have enough saved up. Like I could probably take a trip every now and then, or I could eat out once a week, and it would be okay. But they can't bring themselves to do that because in the back of their head, it's always, well, what if something happens tomorrow? Now I don't have anything.
Right.
But then there's the inverse of that, where there are people that just rack up an insane amount of credit card debt and just can't stop spending, either because of this consumer society that we've built in some regards, or just the way they're wired. They just can't bring themselves to save.
And I would say that somebody who spends to that level, because I don't think the opposite of poverty consciousness is
overextended.
Yeah,
they're little coasters, little record coasters.
Just saw you put a little record coaster. What does it say? The littlest baby boy. Okay, which I read without glasses now. So I don't think the opposite is to go crazy. I think that's a disease too. That's trying to fill a hole that won't be filled. Is I'm not happy with myself. I need to constantly get new things. So keeping up with the Joneses is, I think, what it used to be called. But the poverty consciousness, it's insidious. Because most of us, and there are people who are suffering in poverty, far too many people, especially worldwide, and far too many in this country. There are people who, one of my gripes, pet peeves, concerns is, I've already stated my political views, so it would be the distribution of the way money is distributed. Once you're getting past a couple of $1 billion, I mean, what do you really need? I'm not advocating we take it all away, but what's wrong with you if you have to make that much money? What hole are you trying to fill? So spending to that level is another form of negative self-image. I have to cover up how I really feel by showing everything I've got. Speaking of spending to excess, we are in the midst of a writers and an actors strike right now. And I think it's the head of Disney, but I don't want to say it is him specifically. It's definitely one of the upper echelon of producers of the studios who is making, if the numbers are right, I think his base salary is $25 million. And with bonuses and all the other stuff that he's getting, it's more into the mid-50s. His comment was, we can just, something along the lines of, let's just starve the writers until they can't afford their houses and they'll come back to work. And the average actor, writer, I think makes even less, but we'll say for argument's sake, they both make the same. The average salary for an actor, when we think of actors, of course, we're going to think of George Clooney, Brad Pitt, the big names, the people who are making the millions, as much as I disagree with him, the Joe Rogans compared to the Nick Flores. But most people are not at that level. The average actor makes $69,000 a year. And
that's actually more than I thought it would be.
Yeah, well, it depends, and I'm not sure which term of average it is. If it's average where you add them all up and divide by the number, what do they call that? The mean? If it's the mean, you could have a few people making several billion, which would raise that. Which mean that the average person is actually lower than that. If it's the median, I think is where you stack them all up, all the people making 10,000, 20,000, and 69 is the biggest pile. That would mean actors are making a little bit more than you were thinking. But $69,000, you got somebody who's making $50 million a year telling, let's starve the $69,000 actor. You could cut your salary in half. You'd probably live pretty well. You could then give that money to the people who work for you, take $25 million divided among I don't know, I mean, even if it's 100,000 employees or something, that's a decent enough wage bump that would show empathy. Back to that again. You're still doing fine. You got people who are happier and working for you. They're doing better. Everybody does better. But it's this, I would say it's a poverty consciousness again. He's making all this money and saying, yeah, but I can't afford, I'm not going to give mine back because what happens if I can't buy my third yacht? So,
my life is over.
Yeah.
Well, let's just starve them out is insane.
Yeah.
That line of thinking of all we have to do is wait them out and then they're screwed and they'll have no bargaining chips.
Yeah.
What really freaks me out is the push towards AI that they're trying to do. And
funny, you're like reading
likeness.
my thought.
Yeah. I thought I read an article where it said there was some proposal where they would scan them and then retain the rights in perpetuity. So pay them a couple $100 and then they just own their likeness. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
And then just plug them into whatever movie as an actor, as a background actor, never have to pay them again.
I believe that is something they are capable of doing. And I believe that is one of the actual, what you said, I've heard also. And I think that's something they're trying to do. And some of the studios is, for background actors, what they call extras, we can just scan you and then you can pop up in however many movies we want.
Which is insane. And then you're not getting paid for this theoretical work that you're kind of doing, but also kind of not because you're not really there.
Yeah. If nothing else, you would think it would be intellectual property. Cause
it is a legitimate exact replica of you. You would think you'd be entitled to something, but no, we're just going to sign all that away.
Have you delved at all into any of this AI stuff, Chat GPT and Bard and all of those?
I've played around with it.
Yeah.
terrifies me in some regard, and it also excites me because of the capability.
Yeah, I put in, I have several clip art services that I subscribe to. And one of them has now started, maybe others do too, but one of them has now started where you can get AI images. You're limited to, I think, 10 a day. And I use a lot of clip art I do graphic design and layout and all that. So I was curious what would happen, and I, excuse me, put in something or another to see what images came up. And a lot of them are kind of creepy, kind of real, but I got to admit, I put one in, I put older couple in love, kind of relates to me. And I put older couple in love just to see what would come back. And it gives you like 3 options or something. One of them, I swear to God, looked like a photograph of an older couple just hugging each other. And I thought, oh my God, I mean, these people look real. They're not. Sometimes now when I write my column to get a prompt, I will just say, give me this, and it'll write something. Some of it is really, really bad, but sometimes I'll go, that's really kind of brilliant. But even that, even AI writing whatever it's writing, as I understand it, it's searching the world, the international database, if you will, and it's looking at all these different writers. So even that is taking from some writers, one could say. I mean, I'm putting stuff out every week. Who knows? Maybe somebody in some other country is posting a column based on my writing, and I'm not getting anything for it.
Well, these machines are just scraping the internet for all of this training data. And I think that's what Google said, is they're just going to use everything that's out there to train their data sets. And I think some artists maybe came out and said, hey, we have a problem with this. You're just using our intellectual property for your machine. But how do you fight that?
Yeah,
how do you stop the drums of progress? Yeah. I played around with, it's called Midjourney. It's on Discord.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh my God. So I think it's one of the best ones out there for image creation.
Okay.
It's insane what it can do. The prompts based off just very simple prompts is insane. And I'm pro artist, but I'm also pro this, because for somebody, if you don't have the money to hire out some artist to create some graphic for you or to design something, and you can just think there's a monthly fee to use this one, but the results are incredible.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
But you're going to push all these other people out of business because this thing can do it for a fraction of the cost and create something insane.
Yeah, so it's like people worry about technology. I mean, at one point, a hammer was technology, and people created a hammer, and somebody said, "Oh, you can kill people with that. We can't have hammers." And somebody else said, "Wait a second, you build a house with that too." And that's the same with technology. I saw some story. My wife and I like watching CBS Sunday Morning. It's obviously on CBS, and it's on Sunday mornings. And it's a news magazine. It's like 90 minutes long. It's a collection of stories, not your typical hard news stories. They're more lifestyle, the interviews with people. Some of them have news orientation to it. And one of the stories just recently was how AI is able to spot cancer in people before doctors can by analyzing x-rays, because I presume what it's doing is it's analyzing millions of x-rays, and these x-rays turned into cancer. These x-rays did not. Now somebody gets a real x-ray, gets fed into AI. AI can run through this whole series and go, no, this one's got cancer because all these ones that turned into cancer had this back then. And doctors are starting to rely on that. So is AI bad? I don't know. The other thing I just heard lately was that, this is the part that scares me, is some of the people who are programming AI do not know how it's developing some of its skills that it's developing, because AI then starts to program itself. There was a book in the I think it was the 70s. They turned it into a movie called The Colossus Project or The Forbin Project. Anyway, what it was about is they created a computer. The United States and Russia each created a computer that it was for the two countries together it was AI basically. And they turned over the defense of the countries to this AI because then you won't have to worry about somebody accidentally firing a nuclear weapon at each other. And so the AI, it starts out, it's all right, it's stopping problems and it's doing a great job. And it eventually kind of goes to the thought process of, why do I need these people? And because it becomes conscious unto itself. And it's a common theme in sci-fi that, I don't need people. We can just get rid of all the people. And that's the one that starts to become really scary.
That's the end game that people are afraid of.
I think they call that the singularity, when AI becomes totally self-aware. Yeah.
The question is, do we intervene at some point? And the big point of interest is in terms of jobs. Do we intervene at some point to protect people's jobs, or do we just let the flow of progress continue? And the big one is, these automated cars. What happens when that goes into these semi-trucks, which it already is, these Tesla semi-trucks, and then we don't have truckers? Do we just let those people pivot into a different career path or try to help them pivot, or just say, well, this is the flow of technology?
And I think this is where the empathy comes back in again. I think technology has to advance. It just has to. Again, technology is neither good nor bad. It is. How we handle it is the human side of that. Sadly, I think we look at too many people as disposable. So, a couple of 100,000 truckers lose their jobs. Who the hell cares? As opposed to, at the same time that we are making these transitions, say, okay, well, a couple 100,000 truckers might lose their jobs because of this. Let's use this same technology to figure out what will be coming down the road in yet another 10 years and start training people for that and improve our educational system and start to say, how can we take care of all of these people? Some people will still have their jobs. Some people will find other jobs. I mean, you're still going to need people to direct the trucks. The trucks don't just take off on their own. You still need the control centers and all that. And those are all more educated positions. So what are we going to do for that? And there will still be people who want to ride in drive trucks, I presume, How can we find a way for these people to do this? Unfortunately, what we do, that's the part we just don't seem to care enough about, It's like one of the big arguments against environmental, I don't share this argument, is that if we spend money on on getting rid of pollution and lowering carbon emissions and all that, we're going to put millions of people out of work. Well, not if we then say to these millions of people, let's move you into green jobs. Let's find a way that, okay, yes, you've worked in the oil industry for a while, but oil is killing us. So can we find a way to teach you how to work in geothermal energy, which pays the same or better and doesn't have the same side effects? But there are people who think that way and say, let's see if we can train them. But I don't think enough. And that's where the fear comes up, the humanity. You talked about when AI becomes really smart to the level where it controls everything. I don't know if I told the story last time I was here, but we're now at the state where the story exists. In 1999, when Y2K was the big fear, the story that never happened, everybody was afraid planes would fall out of the sky and buildings would explode. And it was like, nothing happened. But there was a series on ABC News, on ABC Nightline, like in December of 1999. And it was about what the coming century would be like, the century we are now in. I remember Ted Koppel was the host. And it was a 5-night series. There was what education will be like in the next 100 years, what medicine will be like in the next 100 years, what social life will be like in the next 100 years. And one of them was what technology would be like. Now, keep in mind, this was, I guess we had cell phones back then. Late 90s, we would have had cell phones. We certainly didn't have social media. So whoever he was talking to said there's something called Moore's Law. Are you familiar with Moore's Law in computer? Okay, so, and for people who aren't familiar with it, it's the theory founded by a guy named Moore, who I think invented the Intel chip, is that science or computer speeds will double every 18 months. So the speed of the average computer in the year 2000, by 18 months later, it would be twice that. By 3 years, it would be 4 times that. By 4.5 years, it would be 8 times that. It just keeps doubling. So what they did is they extrapolated the speed of an average computer in 1999, which was considerably slower than we have now, of course, and how fast it would continue to get. There is a theory that consciousness is merely the ability to compute very quickly. Our brains are capable of computing so much, so fast. That's why we have consciousness, because nobody knows what consciousness is. We know it was Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Okay, that's all we know. Yeah, I'm here, obviously. So there was, I don't remember what the number was, but they calculated that consciousness would start at however, what do they call them, gigaflops, however many gigaflops. That's where consciousness starts, where the human brain works. They took the speed of an average computer in 1999 and they extrapolated at in what year would it be at the same speed as a human brain? In other words, at what year would consciousness happen? Their best guess was late teens, early 20s. 2019, I think it is 2019 to 2023, thereabouts. What the computer expert, whose name I don't remember, was saying was at that point, sometime another 20, 25 years from now, somebody is going to go to switch off a computer to reboot it or to do whatever they need to do, and the computer will say, please don't. And what that computer operator does at that point will determine.
Oh, no, you're fine. You don't have to use that.
Okay, I just realized I'll put it here. At that point, what the computer operator does will determine the entire future of whether we look at computers as slaves or equals. Because if the computer operator says, no, I'm shutting you off, the computer is now subservient. If the computer operator stops and goes, oh my God, I can't shut you off. We've now created a new race of beings and we have given them intelligence. Now throw into the mix AI. A lot of the phone calls that we get now, there's not a real person on the other end.
Some of them are pretty good, though.
Yeah.
That's the terrifying part.
Yeah,
Some
I
of
know.
them are actually convincing.
Yeah. My wife was having to make a call to someone, I forget what it was about, some tech support thing or something, and the person gets on it was a text message, texting support, chat support, and the person was responding in this really stilted language. And so my wife said, are you a bot? And the person wrote back, no, I'm not a bot. I'm an actual person. My name is such and such. But who knows? It
wouldn't be hard to do nowadays.
Yeah, it's just because that would probably be a standard question. But the language was so weird. It could be somebody from another country who's typing in English and isn't quite as comfortable as they need to be. But yeah, that's a terrifying prospect where we are going. Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting time when we are at this inflection point of, do we treat them as equals or as slaves, like you said?
Mm-hmm.
How will we view them? Because they're not real in the sense that we're real, but they are something. And if they get to this point where they do have what we deem consciousness to be, if they have that, are they now equals? I mean, we have intelligent life on this planet in terms of whales and dolphins, and we don't treat them very well at all.
No, yeah.
Will we have a different perspective for this machine because we created it, and so in some sense it's almost our child will manipulate our perspective a little bit to adjust for them, or
Let's
are they
turn
just going
that
to be
on
the slave?
Let's turn that upside down. will it consider us equals or slaves? What we're looking at it is, will we consider it to be our equal or slave? The Forbes Project, or whatever that book was called, that I just talked about, will the intelligence, the AI, look around at these biological life forms and say, look what they're doing to the planet. I don't need them. They're just getting in the way of everything.
Well, and all of this is predicated on the idea that we would know when that point happens. That suddenly it would become apparent to us that, oh, this is something that is alive and has consciousness. But a good argument is, why would they let us know that? If this thing suddenly becomes conscious, why would it lead on that it is? Why not just continue to play dumb in some sense and see how it plays out? Because you have access to this vast knowledge base, the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I could consume that. My instinct would be to try to rationalize with these monkeys that are pretty chaotic. I might just wait and see, or formulate some other plan.
And conversely, that the other assumption in that argument is that it's not sentient and then it is sentient. What about if it's a gradient, which I think is more likely, is it starts to develop certain traits that we equate with sentience? Is that the word? We equate with being alive.
Almost like a child growing up.
Yes, exactly. So, oh, wow, look at it did that. Well, is that really an intelligent being? No, not yet. But then 2 days later or a year later, it's now doing this. And it's like, well, is that, I don't know. We don't even know when we're alive. I heard a podcast a couple of years ago about where does consciousness exist? I think most people look at themselves, I look at myself this way, I think, as our body exists to basically carry around our head, and we exist inside our head. That's where all our senses is, where our brain is. It's like, the rest of the body is, it's nice to have one, but it's basically a support system for the head.
It's like a car that's just moving you around.
Yes, yeah, okay, that works. The guy, he's a philosopher. His name, I think, is Stephen Harris. And his theory was, as I remember it in this podcast, it was actually, he was being interviewed by Bill Nye the Science Guy. So his theory was that consciousness exists on the subatomic level. Everything is conscious, back to the comment about everything is alive, everything has energy. But it's so small that you can't tell that an atom has consciousness. You put enough of them together and you can see consciousness. You can see us. But yeah, his theory was it exists in everything. Everything is conscious. Atoms are conscious. And so the reason we have consciousness is there's enough atoms in us, and our brain is able to interpret all of that stuff, that we have consciousness. But one would certainly argue that animals have consciousness. I would certainly say that. We can assume bugs have some sort of level of consciousness. There are people who say plants have a consciousness, that, if you monitor a plant and you bring something harmful towards it, it emits a certain type of energy. Does this table have a consciousness? Who the hell knows? Won't be able to answer that one in the near future.
Well, and it's hard to take an objective look from a human perspective where we can anthropomorphize these things to some extent. What is the extent that it truly understands us? Well, we're almost too close to it to really get an accurate picture of that. Same back to the whales.
Yeah.
We kind of have just written them off as, yeah, they're probably some smart. We know that they have dialects and these complex languages, but they're not like us. They can't manipulate their environment. They just swim around. So that gives us an excuse to throw them into containers. And
there's, again, another theory I heard, that dolphins are actually more intelligent than we are.
I've heard that.
But they just don't have opposable thumbs. Yay for the opposable thumbs. They're allowed us to do what we're going to do. And I remember when I was in college, because I was studying, that was I really wanted to, I had a crush on Jane Goodall, the anthropologist. I wanted to move to Kenya and study the chimpanzees, and I was fascinated by animal behavior. And this is a well-known study. They've taken dolphins. First of all, I think dolphins are the only animal aside from humans that have the concept of self-awareness. So if you look at yourself in a mirror, you know it's you. And if you look in the mirror and you see you have a smudge on your forehead, you go, oh, and you'll rub it off because you know that's you. You take a dog, I love my dog. I show him the mirror and he doesn't
get it.
He doesn't get it. It doesn't look like him. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised he doesn't go after the dog in the mirror. It's just, obviously don't know what goes on in his brain. Cats are the same. No other animal is aware of, at least in a mirror, self-consciousness. With dolphins, they put a marker on its side, like a Sharpie. I hope it wasn't a Sharpie, but some sort of marker. And they put mirrors in the pool. And the dolphin would swim by it and look at it and recognize in some way that was it. Yeah, I don't know how it could get it off, but you could tell there was recognition. Dolphins are also able to train other dolphins. So they put dolphins in a pool, and they trained a dolphin. I think chimpanzees do this too. I think I remember the story too. They trained a dolphin to pick up a ball and put it through a ring. So it got fish, So it was rewarded. Then they put an untrained dolphin in the pool. And within a certain amount of time, the untrained dolphin knew how to do that without them training it how to do it. So obviously it was able to learn from the other dolphin how to do it. Chimpanzees, I think it was Lucy. Lucy was a very famous chimpanzee, one of them who they were trying to teach to talk. They were trying, they couldn't actually get it to talk, but
sign language.
Yeah. And when put in a room with how did this work? They put her in a room with what would be considered a threat, like a snake, but it wasn't like a real snake, would start spelling out or communicating to the other chimpanzee. Oh, I think they put the snake in a separate room. They put, and again, I don't think it was real. Then they put the chimpanzee that learned how to speak in that room, and it saw the snake. And then they put the chimpanzee in a room with another chimpanzee that could not speak. And what they saw is the chimpanzee was trying to sign the language of snake or whatever it was in the other room. So obviously they can communicate. I don't remember who it was who said it. Could it be Einstein, who said that it's not that animals are less intelligent for us. It's like they learn what they need to learn for where they live. They don't need to learn this stuff. Why, it wouldn't make any more than we need to learn how to flap our arms. There's no need for that. So are we less intelligent than birds? Well, one might say so, but no, that's just not our skill set. It's not the world in which we live. Birds are brilliant in their environment. Dogs are brilliant in their environment. Fish are different in theirs. And then, of course, there's the old goodbye and thanks for all the fish. Are you familiar? Who was it who wrote the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? It's a very funny series of books, and it's where if you've ever heard the number 42, this guy goes through the universe. He's trying to understand the meaning of the universe, and there's a lot of Hitchhiker fans out there. If they're listening now, they're probably cringing about, oh my God, he's destroying the story. But anyway, I forget who it is. And he goes through all of this thing he wants to understand what is the meaning of the universe. And there is some ultimate godlike being that he's finally able to get to. And he says, I've been searching for you all this time. Please tell me, what is the meaning to the universe? And the being goes, 42. And he goes, what does that mean? He goes, well, that's a whole different question. And the guy has to go. But one of the books that they wrote was called Goodbye and Thanks for All the Fish, which is, we find out in the end that dolphins are really running all of the world. But why would they do anything? Because they got free fish all the time. So when they finally got bored with humanity, they all got in their ship and left. And it was, goodbye, thanks for all the fish. We don't need that.
Yeah. I wonder, specifically with chimps, I wonder how much of that is a fundamental understanding of the words that they're expressing versus just patterns that they've adapted to. So say you have a chimp that is signing I'm hungry and then gets food. Does it really understand what it means to experience hunger in the same way that you and I do? Or has it recognized that if I make this particular sign, a human's gonna go get me some food that I can eat? And so it just locks that away.
On a level like that, you're probably right. It's classical conditioning. But from what I've seen on these, there's other things they can communicate, that it's, feelings and emotions. And
Well, nonverbal communication that they have. Have you ever seen that docuseries on Netflix, Chimp Empire?
no,
Oh, it's really good.
Really?
You should watch it. Yeah, they follow around this group of chimps out in the jungle somewhere, and it's fascinating watching how they interact with each other, how they go on hunts, how they protect their area that they've kind of locked down. It's insane. It's a really good documentary on Netflix. It's like 6 episodes or something.
okay. There was a show I saw about animal behavior, I think it was on Netflix, speaking of intelligence, that most people don't associate crows as being very intelligent, but they really are. Crows and ravens. And they took two poles and they tied a rope. Now, the crow didn't do this, humans did. The crows are really smart. They do construction. But they tied a rope across the two poles. And then from the center of the rope, they hung a rope that didn't reach the ground. So let's say the poles are 6 feet tall, rope goes across, and then they hung a rope that was like 3 feet long from the center of the horizontal rope. And then on the end of the vertical rope, the one that's hanging down, they tied food. I think crows like meat. So some sort of meat product. And then they put the crow out there, and the crow sees the meat, he wants the meat. And he gets below the rope, and he looks up at it. He obviously can't reach it from there, so he tries to fly up and get it, but he can't hover. So he can't get it. As he gets up, gets a bite and falls back down. And it's like, that's going to work. And you see him looking around. It's really fascinating. He goes up on top of the rope and tries to pull the rope up, and the rope falls down again. And what this crow does is takes with his beak, pulls the rope up, puts his foot on the rope, reaches down, pulls the next piece, pulls another couple inches up, puts his foot on it, just keeps doing that until he gets the rope all the way up, then he eats the meat. That's advanced thinking.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's problem solving. Are they stupid? I don't think so.
Well, and there was another case, I think it was some study that they did, where they realized that crows can recognize faces and identify different people with a different face. And I think they had this guy out in a park or something, and he was messing with the crows, and then would come back, mess with them again, and over time they realized, oh, this is this guy. And then he started getting attacked by crows just being out and about. And they realized, oh, they know this guy now, and they know, oh, if he's around, problems are going to follow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I want to say it was crows, but
I wouldn't be surprised. Crows are, like I said, crows and ravens are considered really,
they're just
really
so smart,
Yeah.
just in a different way than us. And we deem that as lesser for whatever reason.
Yeah. Again, their world, they don't need to know how to do half of what we do.
Yeah, they don't need to work a computer.
No.
Yeah, they have no desire to do that.
Yeah, that's true. So what else
do you got? I mean, we're talking about crows. We're talking about chimps.
Yeah,
we're taking some turns on this podcast. Right?
Yes, we are. We're just taking your painting or your print there on the side, New York City. I'm in a play, so I'll get a little publicity in it.
Oh yeah, plug that.
But it's called Pintauro, and it's called Pintauro. It opens August 18th at the North Coast Repertory Theater in Eureka, 5th and D. I'm really excited about it. It's directed by a woman named Cynthia Martels, who is a Tony-nominated actress. She came from New York, and she's now living out here. And she did a play, I want to say it was last October, where she was in it, and she directed it, called Tiny Beautiful Things, which I thought was just a masterpiece of drama. So I'm fortunate I got cast in Pintauro. So Joseph Pintauro is the author, and he was I want to say he was born in the 40s, died in 2012 or 2018, within the last 10 years. He was a priest from the late 50s to the mid 60s, and then he dropped out of being a priest and became a playwright, and was very involved in New York. He lived in New York and was very involved in the, I wouldn't call it the AIDS movement, because, I mean, nobody was moving to have AIDS, but as AIDS was being released into the public, it was becoming a thing. And he was gay, maybe part of the reason he dropped out from being a priest, I don't know. But he was involved in what was it called back? Well, whatever, in AIDS awareness, I guess you could say. So he wrote a series of short one-acts, and Pintauro, what Cynthia, the director, did is she took 8 of these one-acts, and we're just putting them together in a play. So it's 8 completely separate plays. The characters are not the same in any of them. Each play is anywhere from, I think the shortest one is maybe 7 or 8 minutes, and the longest one is probably 15. So you put them all together, it's an hour and a half of theater. I usually do comedic work. This is not comedy. There are some comedic scenes in it. There's one scene called Rex, which is very Portlandia. If you've ever seen the series Portlandia, I was watching a rehearsal last night the way she does rehearsal is, since it's a series of separate plays, one play rehearses one night, and then another play rehearses, and we're not all there to see all the other plays. And now that we're getting close enough, we're now all there, and we're getting for the first time to see what the other plays are. So I'm in 2 of them. And I get to play, one of the scenes the play is called Rosen's Son. And I play Mr. Rosen, who is an old Jewish man and lives in New York. And he shows up, again, all this takes place in the mid-'80s. He shows up the scene starts out where my character is lying on the floor I've got my head in the lap of another actor, and I'm sobbing hysterically. So it's like, wow, light comedy. And as it turns out, he's come over to this apartment in New York because it was his son's apartment. His son died 2 months previously, and his son's lover lives there, and his son's lover has now moved in with somebody else. And it's a very powerful, dramatic scene. And I got to learn a Yiddish dialect for it, so that's fun. And then the other scene I'm in is called Bird of Ill Omen. And I play a character, his name is Spook. So I show up at the rundown apartment of a prostitute, an older prostitute, not for the traditional reasons one would see a prostitute. And we don't know what's going on, but we know that they've had a very long relationship. And my character, Spook, doesn't speak. He's mute, and one can assume he's deaf. And so it's a monologue played by Heather, is my other actor in it. That's one, probably about 7 or 8 minutes, and they're really powerful, emotional clips. There's a scene of it's called Bus Stop Diner, where there's a playwright in a bus stop diner, hence the clever name. And he's waiting for the playwright, or he's waiting for the director to come meet him. The director just directed the opening night of the playwright's play, and the playwright does not like what the director did. So we've got that scene. We've got this one called Rex, which is hysterical. That's the Portlandia one. I won't say anything about it. It's just, people have to come and see it. It's very, very funny. It's all these interesting characters who lived in the 80s in New York, just snippets of life. So obviously, if people get a chance to come see it, August 18th at the North Coast Repertory Theater, which I believe our website is ncrt.net.
What was the thought process in weaving these specific ones together?
Cynthia is just brilliant. I would follow Cynthia to the edge of the earth. Before we went online, I mentioned to you I'm going to see what I can do about getting a couple of the people, including Cynthia, to show up and we could have a conversation. I think you two will go agog over her. such a great word, agog. But he wrote dozens of these snippets, and the whole play is being set up to kind of be a slice of New York. So, for example, in between the scenes, during the set changes, which we do our own set changes, there's New York street sounds, and people are just walking back and forth like a busy New York street. The music for each scene is chosen a little differently. So it's kind of like you'll come in for the night, you'll sit down, and you'll be transported to 1980s New York, kind of voyeuristic almost, because the light will come up and here's a scene, and you'll watch the scene for 10 minutes, and the lights go down, and then they got the New York hubbub, and then another scene comes up. But they're all really, really powerful. I'm suffering from imposter syndrome because some of the people who are in this cast are like, did you know you cast me with these people? Some people who I've watched who I've known for a while in the theater community, Jordan Dobbins, who is, for people who are in the local theater community would know him. He played Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar. He's a brilliant actor and singer, and he was also the lead in Cabaret. I think he was the lead in Oklahoma. Pretty much if there's a musical, he does the lead. Caroline Needham, who is I believe she's the high school drama teacher at Eureka High, but she was just picked in the either North Coast Journal or Times Standard, where they do all the voting, as the best actress in Humboldt County. So she's in the play. Those are two people who people might know. Cynthia, of course, people might know. The other actors I am not as familiar with, but they're all really powerful. And I just wanted to make sure we got a plug for that, for Pintauro, Pintauro. We play now at the North Coast Rep. We play in what's called Repertory. So like our play will be August 18th, 19th, and 20th. That's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's opening weekend. And then the next Friday, Saturday, Sunday is a different play called Lysistrata. And then the following Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're back. And then the Friday, Saturday, Sunday after that, Lysistrata is back, and we rotate back and forth for 6 weeks. So each time we each get 3 weekends. Lysistrata is the complete opposite. It's a Greek farce, and it was written a long, long time ago. I want to say a couple thousand years ago. It's been modernized, but the basic concept behind it is the women of Greece, or certainly of Athens, or wherever this takes place, are fed up with all the wars. So in order to stop their husbands from going to war, they decide to withhold sex until wars stop. So it's a very bawdy, both of these are very mature themes, but it's a very bawdy comedy. The set has a couple of pillars that are, designed so they don't look like pillars, and the flowers don't look like flowers. And so it's, anyway, because I am very proud of the work that the North Coast Rep does, I want to make sure I'll take any publicity. To get that out. Yeah.
The local theater scene is pretty strong out here.
It is. Unfortunately, Redwood Curtain Theater had to close.
That's the one that closed.
Yeah, not too long ago. There might be something happening with that, but this community, Eureka, has been chosen. I haven't heard it in a while, but I know about 10 years ago, we were consistently picked as one of the top 10 artistic communities in the country, or artistic small communities in the country. There's just books about it. You can probably look it up, top 10 artistic communities. And they took a look at what different communities do. And it was based on live theater, art. I mean, the murals, my wife is an artist, Marianne Testagrossa, 106,000 followers on Instagram. So there's a lot of artists in the area. There's a lot of musicians in the area. I mean, there's murals everywhere. This is an area that celebrates the arts, which is one of the reasons I think a lot of us live here. That and the fact that, we're sitting here at 420. The weather is 65 degrees.
It's nice outside today.
Yeah.
The sun actually showed up.
Yeah, as opposed to go about another 100 miles inland. Who knows what Reading's dealing with right now? So it's a great place to live. But we're very artistic, and think about it. We have an orchestra in a community this size. We have a dance troupe in a community this size. The ballet, whatever you call it. We have a light opera. We have North Coast Rep, Ferndale Rep, No Exit Theater, I think, is still going. HSU does theater production. It's for
there's that one Del Arte.
As a matter of fact, my castmates in Rosen's Son, my character's name is Ziggy Rosen, Mr. Rosen. His son's name was Ben, fictitious son. Ben was involved with Eddie. So Eddie is in this. Eddie is played by Jordan Dobbins. And then Eddie's boyfriend, lover, partner, whatever, is played by Jaden Clark, who works at Del Arte. So again, like I said, this cast is a dream cast. David Fuller's in it. Other people who I'm just getting to know, but it's just this wild cast of great people. But yeah, Del Arte is big, and people come from all over the world, certainly the country, to go to Del Arte and learn clown stuff. Yeah.
Is this your first foray into theater as an actor? I know we talked a little bit off air about the one that you did with your sister, but you were directing that one, right?
I'm giving credit where credit is due. It's more like my sister and her husband did the directing. I more produced it. I did like the first layer. My directing looked like this table.
Yeah, kind of set the framework for it.
Exactly. And then my sister came in and she put a little bit of varnish on it. And then my brother-in-law, her husband, came in and he polished it and took it to a level. The reviews on it were phenomenal. We were sold out almost every night. It was just a happy, fun night. It was a very positive message. So I kind of considered myself the conductor in the program. As a matter of fact, that's how I describe myself. Is I found all the pieces. I put everybody in place. I got to play Doc from the Seven Dwarfs, although a different character of him. And everybody else got to play their fairy tale characters. We had Cinderella and, Jack and the Beanstalk and all of these. So that was one that I actually ran. But before that, no, I've been in several murder mysteries, Dial M for Murder, The Spider's Web, The Hollow. My favorite until Never After Happily was called Native Gardens, which was 4 of us. It took place right after, it was written in 2017, but we mounted it 2017, Trump was already elected. And it was an old conservative couple. I was one of them, Frank Buckley, and my wife, played by Denise Riles, who's just a hoot and a half. And myself and Denise played an old conservative married couple. It takes place in Maryland. And we live in a really nice house, and we're very proud of my garden. I'm like obsessed with my garden. And a young Latin couple moves in next door, and it's a terrible fixer-upper. The set was amazing. Diana Lynn did the set design, and it really looked like 2 houses sitting there with dirt and the whole thing. Anyway, they move in. They believe in native gardens, which drives him crazy because his is every grass is pretty much trimmed, and theirs is like, now we're just going to leave it with dirt. And what they discover when they're working in there, when they're moving in, is that the fence line is actually, the conservative couple has built their fence 2 feet into the
neighboring property,
into their property, and they want their property. So it becomes a thing about, well, we're going to build a wall, and it becomes a farce with a strong political message to it, and it was just. The artistic director of North Coast Rep is a man named Calder Johnson, who I really admire. And when we were doing that play, I said, how far do you want us to take this? He goes, take it to farce and drop it about a half a notch. So it was just a blast. So I get to Native Gardens. I enjoy doing theater. It's working without a net. When you do film or even a podcast or something, you can always go back to the editing room when you're live in front of an audience. You're doing it on your own. And if you screw up, I remember there was one scene, the first play I got cast in was, I was cast in several in the early 2000s, and then I was on the road and came back again in 2016. It was called The Hollow. It was an Agatha Christie murder mystery, and I played the inspector. And there was one scene where I've got somebody sitting on the couch. It was actually played by Caroline. She's sitting on the couch, and I have found a purse with a gun in it, as the inspector. And I haven't told anybody I found this purse, but I'm holding this purse, and I'm questioning her, and I want to do the big reveal, and pull out the gun and say, and what's this? But there's some buildup to it. And I take the purse, and I'm supposed to hold it up as I'm standing, what would be called downstage right at the corner of the stage in front of the audience. Pick up the purse, and I look at it. In my head, I'm going, holy crap. I don't remember what I'm going to say. And I just stood there, and it's like terror runs through you, and you're going, and she's waiting, because, what you do is if somebody else messes up your lines, you have to just go with it, and then it was like, oh, and then, the line comes to me, and I do the line, and, I went backstage, and she said something along the lines of, you lost it, huh? I go, yeah. She goes, looked actually really good. The audience just took it as drama, because I'm sitting there going, but from an aging brain's point of view, one of the best things you can do is memorization. So, as you get older, you want to keep your brain sharp. One of the best ways is to fight Alzheimer's. So I kind of rationalize it as, well, that's why I do these plays. So my brain will stay young.
Well, it's easy to see that you enjoy it. I mean, that comes across even just talking about it right now.
Yeah. And then, and being in a troupe of people who are as talented as the people in this cast, you're either going to do one of two things. You're going to quit and go, I can't do it. Or you're going to, the expression is man up, but it could be woman up, whatever. You're going to say, okay, if they're doing that good, they're doing that well, and I'm in this group, I guess I can do that well too. Let's push it, and, the scene where I play Mr. Rosen is, I have never done anything this drama intensive. I mean, starting out crying on a stage, which unto itself is hard to do. By the time I'm done with that scene, I'm like completely exhausted, and the other scene, I don't have any lines, but it's still an emotional scene. So that's where I'll be going after I leave here.
Can you cry on command? Do you have that down, or do you have some tricks to kind of get you there?
I can. I have to go to a place where I can get to it. It's easier, like in Bird of Ill Omen, there's a very emotional scene towards the end of it where I am crying. But I've got time to build to it, because you get into the place of your actor, of your character. It's not like, oh, I'm just saying lines. And in this case, I'm not even saying lines. I'm just feeling what's going on. And then you get to a place where it's like, you feel what this character is feeling. You inhabit this character. So doing it that way, it's pretty easy. But to just
start the scene crying.
and not just, not just like that, but hysterical, heaving, sobbing, So I've come up with a couple of techniques. Part of what I do is when I'm lying on the stage, I've got my eyes covered. So just because I'm lying there, it's lying like that. It makes it at least a little easier so people aren't noticing it, and then I can build myself into it. But it's really, I mean, if anybody is local community theater, if you've got the urge, give it a shot, because like I said, you get to inhabit, especially if the play is well written, you get to inhabit somebody else's being. They become you. It's really kind of an honor. I was writing in my journal a couple of weeks ago that, wow, I get to create Ziggy Rosen. He will exist from August 18th until like September 15th. And then he goes away again. He will exist as long as I do him. And somebody else might do him somewhere else, and they'll do him completely separately. Other plays, as long as we're on it, coming up at the end of the year, we have 39 Steps. That'll be in November. 39 Steps starts in November, as does It's a Wonderful Life, the radio play. And I will be in It's a Wonderful Life, the radio play. and I am lobbying to play the role. I think I'm too old to play George Bailey, although it's a radio play on stage, so it'll look, we still haven't even started, but it'll look like an old-fashioned 1940s set, and probably have greased back hair and brown suits and all that, and we will be doing it. I believe the initial plan is there will be somebody who actually does the sound effects, and there will be an audience. There will be a live audience. So I could technically do George Bailey, but I think I've aged out of that role. So I'm lobbying for Clarence the Angel because he and I are age peers. I figured he was, I think, 220 at his last birthday. All right,
Close enough. I give or take a few years. Yeah.
If I don't get Clarence, I'm hoping I get Mr. Potter because I love playing villains at times too.
So radio play, more so, it's an adaptation now to fit the stage.
Yeah, it's as opposed to a more
just
traditional. Well, the actors will be up there, and we're so early into it. Carol Lang is directing it. Carol there's a local movie that was produced called Autumn's Run. I don't know if you've heard anything about it. Totally produced, directed, written here in Humboldt County. Filmed with all local actors in 2020 during COVID, of all places, based on a story that Carol really, really liked. Carol is brilliant, and she'll be directing It's a Wonderful Life. But Autumn's Run, which you can now stream on Amazon, I don't think I'm exaggerating or lying, just won some awards at the New York Film Festival. It's won a couple of other awards, too. It's about a 90-minute movie, all filmed, like I said, here in Humboldt, basically out in southern Humboldt, like Redway area. It's a drama about 4 siblings, I think, uncovering getting back together. I think it's after the death of a father or something like that, and they're all meeting at this old cabin. So again, more talent in the local area. I know I'm pretty sure Carol's moving on to make her next movie, which I think is going to take place in Old Town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think she's trying to get that up in 24, 25. Are we out?
I set an alarm so that we could get you out of here on time.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Yeah, 4:30.
Scott, well, I knew I was going to have a great time sitting down with you.
It's just sitting and talking with a friend. Yeah, that works out well.
Do you want to plug all your stuff where people can find
certainly Pintauro, August 18th, opening, and Lysistrata, opening August 25th. I'll be the house manager, as I always am at North Coast Rep. So you'll see me in the front of the stage, not behind it. What else have we got going on? My website or my Facebook group is Intentions, Affirmations, Manifestations. It's a positive Facebook group. I am a practitioner for the Eureka Center for Spiritual Living. Services every Sunday, non-denominational, non-judgmental, all ages, all genders, all colors, all whatever. We don't judge, we just welcome. So that's every Sunday. It's over on Boone. Anything else I want to promote? I promoted my wife's website, MarianneTestagrosaArt.com, which is worth checking out, especially if you like black cats.
I think I saw it. Did you post one of those on your Facebook?
I did.
I think I saw that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, she does beautiful work. Obviously, she's my wife, but she had a video go viral last year and got 33 million views.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Would she post on TikTok or something?
No, just on Instagram.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, one of the reels, I think they're called.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
And it caught wind, and some big people got it, and away it went. And she already had 27,000 followers at that point, so it wasn't like she had 3 or 4 people. So she had been working it already for 4 or 5 years to get to 27,000. And then this caught, and it was funny because it was last summer, right about this time, we were on vacation in Grants Pass, and she would come to me, she had her phone, but once the video hit, she'd come back, like, just got 5,000 new followers. Oh my God, I got 6,000 more followers. I got another 3,000 followers, and she's now got 106,000 followers. But it's great to have followers, but if you don't have the talent to support it, what good is it? So she does very well. Marianne Testagrosa. So certainly go to her. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm already looking forward to the next one.
Good. I would hope so. Would make it a regular thing.
All right. Thanks, Scott.